Let's begin, shall we? Talk a little bit about composition images. So, um, so composition images is, I mean, it's really what I'm referring to when I refer to photographic art or composition images are images that contain multiple image files within them. And what we're doing is we're using those files in conjunction with another to create something beautiful, right? Something that works with those two images well, displays parts of those images, and doesn't clash visually. And just to be clear, a lot of this is going to be subjective because we're creating art in a way, or we're creating a composition that uses multiple images. But just so bear with me in regards to that. So what I mean by multiple images, if you're super new to ACDSee, you will have worked in edit mode. You've probably used adjustment layers on the bottom right-hand corner. We use these a lot in our workshops. You've probably used filters on the left-hand panel, and perhaps you've also used, certain tools like actions and such in edit mode. Certainly, you've maybe explored at using something like the select subject tool in conjunction with maybe like a curves edit or something like that, or you've selected the sky. But one of the major components of ACDSee and in edit mode is the ability to have multiple images. And what I mean by that is, so I have my layer here, and if I can actually create a duplicate of this layer, and then these layers can interact with one another predicated on some sort of change in opacity or masking, which we'll cover obviously today, or blending, right? So that would impact the visual presentation of one image from one to the other. So what that looks like, for example, is if I was to do something like apply a multiplied blend mode of this image on top of the image that appears directly beneath it, then you have this darkening effect that you see here, right? And that's just the blending of one image that appears on the top beneath the other. Oh, let me turn this on too. Sorry, I'm realizing I missed something. There we go. Leave that guy on as well. There we are. So I have this image here that can be created or can be used in such a way that it's applied to other images in our layer order. So in our layer order, obviously the layer that appears predominantly at the top is going to be the one that's shown to us, barring any form of masking or blending. It sort of takes visual precedence, and that's a good way of thinking about it. There's ways to sort of shine through or see other layers in your layer stack, but typically speaking, in a normal circumstance, right, when this has normal blend qualities and there's no masking, we're seeing that image first and perhaps no other images. And so that's sort of important to understand when it comes to making a composition image. The other thing that's really important to note is that when we're adding images to our layer order, you can see here that just in the tool, I can add what we call a blank layer, which, when you apply it, it doesn't contain any pixel information yet. The other thing I can do is I can do something like a duplication of my layer, which I've done here. You can see that these two layers are actually the same. So that's like when I take an image and I go, oh, I like that. I want another copy of that image. From there, you can see that I can also mask my images. And just honestly, show of hands, raise hands, just how many people have used masking in this workshop like within the last like couple months, say. Okay, 4 of you so far, 5. Okay, masking is relatively unfamiliar to some of you. So this is going to be something we'll talk about. Okay, thanks. You can lower your hands if you'd like. I appreciate that. Okay, so masking is something we'll talk about. And it's going to be really vital to understanding this workshop. Um, so that is a component of making a composition image. So what I mean by that, let's show you. Let's take these two layers off for the time being. We'll come back to this to create it, but let's just first understand what a mask is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer here, and I'm going to add just a blank layer over top of it. I'm going to fill that layer with the color red. So, um, So you have our blank layer here. You can see that I added that by just adding the plus button. Blank layers don't contain any pixel information, so they're blank. Basically, all this image is a layer that contains 0 pixels, or I guess, it would be -1 or whatever. It's not a pixel value. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my paint bucket tool and I'm literally just going to grab the color red. So I grab my color red by clicking on the foreground color picker, and I'm going to click on my image. With my layer 1 highlighted, you can see that my layer 1 is visible now. So I have red. This illustrates my point about layer presentation mattering, right? Now with an image over top of our base image, which we'll actually rename for the purpose of this workshop. Now that image is taken visual precedence and is displayed to us over top of our image, which means that it is the one we see. We don't see the base image, we see the layer 1. So masking is a way to hide parts of our image. And when I say hide, what I mean is to produce something very similar to what we saw with that blank layer, to produce a transparency in our image so that what we see shines through to the image that appears beneath it. What I mean by that is you can turn parts of your image on and parts of your image off. Let's just do a really rudimentary mask. So there's a couple ways to mask. You can make a selection first, like this. So I can make a selection of my on my image here. Let's drag and drop. I have a little square that I'm going to add to the center of my image. Let's change the overlay color so that's better, more visible. Let's make it green. Much better. So here I have a square in the center of my image. This is an active selection. So what we're going to do with an active selection is just essentially a holding area. It's telling you, hey, you have this information. What do you want to do with it? And what you can do with this is you can make adjustment layers to it. So you can change the levels of it, or you can filter apply to this part of your image. The other thing you can do is you can apply a mask with it. So when I go to click on this button here, this add layer mask, you're going to see what's going to happen to this part of our image here. Okay. So it's very red and green. Yeah, maybe we'll change it. Actually, it's a really good point. It's very jarring. Change it to blue. It's better. So I've masked my image predicated on a quality. So the quality that I had was a selection, a square selection in the center of my image here. And so now you can see that that impacts my mask here, which appears to the right of my image itself. So when I have a selection and when I go to click on the mask button that adds a mask to my image, this little square box appears next to our layer, and that contains this little, I guess like it's a thumbnail to best be understood. But really what it is it's a little indicator telling me that I have a mask on this image. And what this mask is I've selected, in quotation marks, a part of my image to be presented to me and to not be presented to me. So let's just verify what we see here. So around the box, we see our image that appears beneath it, the base image. And within the box, we see the red, right? The quality of the red that we have here. So what this mask is telling us is that it's quote unquote turned off everything that wasn't in that selection. So the black part of our image here in our thumbnail corresponds to the part of our image here that we see. Vice versa, the part that we see, the white part of our mask, is the part that we see in our image, right? So we've taken something as simple as a selection, like an active selection, and we've used that active selection to inform the quality of our mask. This is one way to add a mask. Let's look at a different way, and we'll talk about this process again. Masking is maybe one of the more immediately complicated things in ACDSee, so I'm going to explain this a couple times just in case it doesn't get fully absorbed, and you'll see how it works. So I've removed my mask. Let's undo that just so I can show you what I mean. So on the left, we have our image layer here, and on the right, we have our mask. What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate down underneath the adjustment layers panel here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to click delete layer mask. And when I delete the layer mask, right, it removes it. So it's just back to being a red image now. So there's no selection anymore. It's wholly displayed to us. Okay, let's do something different. So last time I showed you that we can make a mask predicate on selection. We made like a rectangle selection, right? The next thing we can do is we can add a mask on its own and then inform our selection after the fact, which is typically what we're going to be doing in certain situations when it comes to composition images and photographic art. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my layer here and I'm going to add a mask to it. In this case, this is adding a mask using the mask tool itself. And all this does is it takes my layer here, my layer one, my red layer, and all it does is it just adds a mask to it. Now, this mask contains information much like the previous one did. This information is slightly different. White, the color we're seeing in the mask here, tells us that this mask is turned on, and therefore the contents directly to the left of the mask are displayed to us. So if the whole mask thumbnail is white, we can see that our whole image here is going to be like a display of this red. When we start to introduce black to the mask, then this will invert, or basically it'll start to show the parts of our image that exist beneath it. A good way of understanding this, and masks in general, is they function in this kind of binary way where they're either black or white. They're either turned on or they're turned off. And so when I take this mask and I actually invert it, its inversion will be considered black and it'll turn the mask off, because off in this case is black. This black color is off. So when I turn it off, right, boom, the layer that exists beneath it is now takes visual precedence and we see it. So if I invert it again, I turn it on, red's back on, it now takes visual precedence because all of its pixels are being displayed. How do we make a selective change in regards to this? Let's showcase. So if I take this mask here, I click on it. Let's just make a brush selection on our mask. So I'm going to take my mask here. Really importantly, actually, I'm going to be brushing on with the black, which in this case would turn that mask off, right? And then, oh, let's up the opacity just fully. And I'm just going to mask a little triangle in the center of my image where my subject is. So previously, we sort of set up the understanding of masks, how they work kind of binary, and how the white is an illustration of the mask being presented to us, and the black is the part of our mask being hidden from us, basically. Now we can start to see with things like brush tools, even with complex selections, that we can actually showcase certain parts of our image. And in this example here, okay, well, I mean, it's not super complicated. All I have is a layer that exists over top of my base image, and I've masked a certain part of it to showcase the image that exists directly beneath it, right? So this is obviously not that important when it comes to just the color red in our image. This is not super useful for us, but as I showcase what to do in this workshop, this will make much more sense in its application. But this is a really fundamental part of making any composition images, is understanding the concept of masking. And so this is something I really want to spend a lot of time on. Basically, masking on its fundamental level is the ability to showcase parts of a layer, right? It's choosing which parts of a layer we want to illustrate, to showcase to the viewer, to me, or which parts to hide. And the way that we hide parts of our image is by masking them off, so turning them black. And the way that we show parts of our image is masking them white, or turning or keeping them on. Does anyone have any questions in regards to this before I move on to the next stage of the workshop? And just take your time to write something out in chat. We won't move on immediately here. I just want to make sure that everyone understands this. If there's any sort of small questions, happy to answer those. And happy to come back to those questions as we go on if someone needs some more time to type something out. But masking is very, very important when it comes to composition images. And the reason why is we're going to be working with another layer. And what I mean by that, let's just delete this red layer for now. So we still have our base image. And when we're working in ACDSee, we're probably working, we opened up a file predicated on a base image. Well, we can add a whole nother image. So if I navigate down to add a file as a layer, right? I can add a whole different file to this I suppose this artboard or workspace. And when I do that, you can see that, look, now it's not just our base layer of the man on the train tracks. No, it's actually a whole image of this sky that I've added here as well. We won't use this right away, but you can see that this image is added to our layer order and now is taking visual precedence over a part of our image. Something to note is images that we're adding to our document are going to have different aspect ratios. And so when I added this image, you can see that its orientation is like a rectangular orientation, but it's longer than it is wide. And so when I've added it, you can see that the space that it takes up in my image here. When I have clicked on my image here, you can see that when I go to add a new file to my workspace, you can see that it has a bounding box surrounding it. So this bounding box, it tells me that I can reposition, I can rotate, I can shrink this image. So if I click on these little guys in the corner, you can see that its aspect ratio is maintained, which just means it scales up evenly, right? And I can also rotate my image by using this little rotation button in the center here. So this is the way that we can position images on our file. So I've set this image, or rather I've added this image. And in order to move on to do something else with my layer here, I need to do what we call committing a brand new layer to our file. And to commit it, all it is it'll just set the image in place and then it will remove the bounding box from it. And then you can see that my image is presented to us. One other thing that's important to note too is this image has a transparency around the edge of it because it's smaller than the base image that I have here. And that information is displayed to us in this little box here, the image box. This might look similar to the effect we had previously, like when we were talking about masking with the rectangle box here. But all it's saying is that this image is actually unmasked. It's fully presented to us. It just happens to be smaller than the base image that we're working from, which is the base image is what's informing the canvas size of our edits. So we'll probably end up enlarging this image prior to our final edits on this file. Okay, let's actually begin and we'll start talking about what we want to do here. Okay, so we understand what masking is. We'll reiterate it throughout the workshop, and we understand that you can add multiple image files to a workspace or a composition, which enables you to actually begin the process of making edits to an image. The move tool takes you back to the bounding box. So Norm mentioned that basically what Norm's trying to illustrate in this comment in question is that if I click on the move tool while selecting the layer here, I can actually make that bounding box reappear, which gives me the ability to re-edit this image. And in this case, I could just make it bigger now than the canvas size if I wanted to and recommit the layer. And then you can see the file there. So Norm's correct. The move tool, this little icon in the top left-hand corner, provides me with the ability to reposition the file. And that's a great question. Sorry, I didn't see that question, CB, but I saw Norm's comment to it. So yeah, that's the answer. Um, what I want to do with this file is I want to partition it in the center, and I want to use my subject here as a piece that is the emphasized element. Like I said, we're going to treat this as like a header for a photographer. So what we're going to do is to make a composition. We're actually going to name this person. We'll call him like Peter Din, and we're going to call him photographer. We're going to apply that text underneath, and we're going to use it as like akin to like almost an advertisement for him. And we're going to do that by partitioning the image in half and sort of using half of the image as like it's easy to see with the text, so it has a high contrast. And we're going to make sure that he covers both portions of that to get almost like a sense of dimension to the image. So what I'm going to do is the very first thing that I need to do in order to create this composition is I need to make a selection of the subject. So, and the reason why we're going to do this is because we intend to create another layer that just contains the subject. So what I want to do here is I want to make a duplication of my base image. So we talked about this briefly. I'm going to click on this duplicate layer icon, and I'm actually going to rename this. I'm just going to rename this to subject. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a selection of this gentleman here. Now, I've already actually made a selection of him. That's my selection of him. But I'm going to show you how to make this selection yourself as well. Selections are something that you can use to make changes to your image. I can use the selection, like I said, to make something like a levels or exposure adjustment. We can overexpose or underexpose a part of my image predicated on a selection. The reason why we want to make a selection is because we intend to mask the subject, not necessarily because we want to adjust the values of the subject. So the fastest way to begin this process is by using our AI functions, which we added a couple versions ago in ACDSee, and we're going to use the select subject button. So select subject is going to create a rudimentary, sometimes hyper-accurate selection of the subject in your image. And this is predicated on essentially what's in focus, the central focus of your image. So subject doesn't necessarily have to mean a person. It can just be the thing that's in the center of your image that happens to be more in focus than quote unquote the background, which will be slightly out of focus. As you can see, because this image is kind of, there's a lot of things that are actually in focus in this image. It didn't do a particularly wonderful job of the selection, but it did a good enough job. And so we're going to work with this beginning selection. What this does for me is it gives me the space to start the process, really. It doesn't need to be perfect. And a good portion of photographic art and composition images is going to be making very good selections. Selections are key to success. So let's talk about them. So we have here our AI selection of sort of our guy here. As you can see, it did a fairly good job in the torso, and it did a pretty miserable job in the lower half of the body here. So this is what we need to change. There's a couple tools we can use to do this. The selection itself is sort of illustrated with this like blue area here. Typically, the way that selections are illustrated to us is using marching ants, like you can see here. I'm not particularly fond of marching ants. I think it slows down the operation, and also it's hard to see. So what I do is I navigate to select and overlay options, and I change this pretty much right away when I install a new version of ACDSee. Typically, I select with actually red, not blue. So when I do this, it's going to change the selection color to red. This overlay, all it showcases to me is that this is what I'm currently selecting, and I can do something with this. We haven't done anything with this yet. We need to improve the selection itself. I'm going to click the brush tool. There's a selection window here up at the top. This window contains brush selection tool, excuse me, shape selection tool, rectangular, elliptical selection, the traditional lasso, magic wand selection, and then AI object selection. We're really only interested in two selection methods. It's the brush tool and the shape selection tool right now. Click the brush. When you use a brush tool in ACDSee, there's kind of a fast way to understand how this works. Right clicking, so using, left clicking, it sort of paints the effect on. In this case, I'm painting my selection on. And by using the right click button on my mouse, it brushes it off. So as you can see, there's some sections here that we need to actually remove from our selection. So I'm going to right click and just paint them right off. And I'm going to try to do a faithful rendition of that. And so that then paints that part of my image off. And you can see it is no longer selected. If we zoom down, you can see that, let's see here, there's some sections that it missed right here that we definitely don't want to capture. And then we'll clean this up area up in a second. And the same, this is also the case down here with the shoe area here. So I just want to take this off. This was just a mistake of the AI operation that we want to correct manually. Really a theme for the modern era at this point. And then I'm going to do that right here as well. I'm just trying to take off any areas that it made a mistake on. Okay, so now we have these larger parts of our image. So I can actually use something like the brush tool to paint these on. Like, for example, if I left click here, you can see that I can paint on this part of my image, and that would add it to the selection process. This is actually a pretty good way to do this as well. I'm just repositioning as I go. The other thing I can do is I can use the polygonal selection tool, or this guy right here, the shape selection tool, to add something to our selection as well. And I'll show you how to do that. This might be a bit more of a faster process than brushing. Brushing is more precise, but it's not necessarily as fast. So the shape selection tool is kind of fun. I have my shape selection tool selected, and very importantly, I have it set to add to selection. So when I've made a selection with the AI tool, for example, we've already added this red portion to our image. So if I don't have an additive selection method, this guy right here clicked, what it's going to do when I go to make a shape selection is it's going to create a new one for me, right? Rather than utilize the first one I have here and then add to it. So we just want to make sure we're in the plus mode for this, because being in the plus mode is going to enable me to select more. Inversely, if I use the negative selection, so this isn't creating a whole new selection, this is removing from our selection. If I was going to make a removal, I could do something like that, and it would straight up remove a part of my selection from my overall, I guess, selection in this case. So we want to make sure that we're adding to this, and then we're going to add the leg on the left. So I have the plus selection tool selected, which is important. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click. And as I click, it creates this, I guess it's similar to that bounding box we saw earlier when we were moving our subject. And really what this does is it enables me to make a selection of the shoe and the foot here. And I can go around the edge of this, clicking as I go, and that adds that portion there. When I want to stop that process, I can double click and then it ends the selection process. I'm not going to use this per se this time, but I can also use this tool to bend particular parts and add it to my selection. It works not on the selection nodes themselves, but rather the in-between area, the white space in between. And then it adds these little round nodes that allow me to continue to add things to my selection. And from there, I have this sort of rough component that I've added here, and I'll just click commit, and it will fundamentally now and join it with the previous selection that I have. Looks like I missed the foot there, but I'm not going to spend too much time. This is just to showcase how these tools work, because I've already made a selection of the subject. But I would do the same in this case for the other leg. So I would take this process and I would go shape selection tool, make sure it's additive, and I would just go around adding these little notches, and that will make sure to add this selection to our composition. Selections are important. You're going to want to use a combination of AI selections and fine-tuning with manual selections, which is what I'm doing right now. That's my foot. I'll commit, and that would add it then to the master selection. You can see that parts are missed here. I would want to fill that in. I would want to probably clean up the edges. I want to capture the hair. This is a good example of something I'd want to clean up as well, just around here. And I would just do that using the brush tool. I would just click the brush tool and I would just go, oh, okay, well, I'll just take this in a little bit and then use that. And that would sort of add those sections to my selection. Selections should be as good as you possibly can make them, because especially when we're working with composition images, there's nothing really to hide behind. So you need very accurate selections. So I said I expedited this process just so I don't have to sit here making sure to capture all these elements. If you have a selection you like, what you can do is you can go down to select and save your selection. And that will give you the ability to add it to a bank that's basically saved with this image itself. So I did this previously, and I'll load it. I'm going to load a selection that I made, just called selection 1. And you can see when I clicked on that, it adds the tail end of the coat here and parts of the hair and things like that that I didn't miss. And cleaned up a little bit of the edges here. If your selection is really good, but you want to add like a little bit extra to the edge of your image, I'm sure at some point some of you have maybe made a selection of something, and then when you went to look at it against a background, there was a little white edge or a little edge around the image. This is called haloing. It's something that happens to selections. And the way to remove or to work with this is to go to the selection tool itself. Once you have an active selection, and just click the refine tool. And so what the refine tool will enable you is to push a selection either outwards or inwards. So I'll show what that looks like. So if I was to shift an edge inwards, you can see that it removes a portion of the selection. If you have haloing that occurs in your image, do this. Essentially shift your edge inwards. And if you want to encapsulate more of your selection, which I might do in this case, I might make a positive shift edge. So in this case, I don't think I'll go this far, but you can see that it pushes the selection, the total selection, further out. So we'll probably just stick with the 3 that we had here. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see what we want to do with this image. Actually, maybe we'll go -1, just to really make a slight indent on our selection here. So what this is going to do is when you go to refine a selection and you refine your edge inwards or outwards, you'll click done. And what it'll do is it will quite literally change the selection, the active selection you have. So it will refine it for you, right? And then we can do something with this selection, right? Now that we have it. So let's just back up a little bit. So we have a selection of our subject. This is ideal. We want to use this for a composition. What we want to do now is we want to take our mask, or we want to take our layer and create a mask predicated on the selection. In the example selection that we made earlier to mask, we drew a little rectangle. We do a rectangle with the rectangle selection tool. What we're about to do works very similar. We're taking a selection and we're going to use that selection to inform a mask. Whenever you have an active selection and you go to click on the mask tool, which is this one right here, add layer mask, what it's going to do is it's going to take that selection and it's going to straight up turn it into a mask. So when I do this, click, deselect, you can see that this is what was masked. All I've done is hidden my base image here. So I have my subject on top and then my base image behind it, which is currently just hidden from view. And you can see that my selection was used to inform my mask. If we refer to our mask, which is this guy right here, you can see that everything but the subject, right, the person in this image, pardon me, is turned off. The subject's turned on, therefore we know that this was selected or this was masked predicated on that selection that we made. Let's turn our base image back on. Now, what happens when we add layers between these? So let's make a layer. I'm going to add a blank layer. And let's make the blank layer a color. Let's just make it white for right now. Or actually, better yet, let's choose a color in our image here. I'm going to click on the eyedropper. And I'm going to use this eyedropper to select a color in my image here, probably this light gray. The eyedropper tool is really useful, but it has a slightly infuriating quality to it that you must understand. Eyedropper tool works on the layer that is active. For example, if I happen to be on this layer 1 that was blank, that contains no visual information in it, and I use the eyedropper tool, right? Actually, it seemed to work in this example. I don't know why that's the case, and it never works with, oh, you know what it doesn't work on? Masks. That's right. That's right. Okay, so in this case, it did actually work. But anyway, my point is that with the best operation you can have is just always make sure that you're selecting from the image that you want to pull a color from. So I don't want to pull a color from a mask. I don't want to pull a color from a layer that is empty. I want to pull a color from the layer, the base image in this case. So I'll just take this image and I'll select this eggshelly white here that's in the clouds. I'm just clicking on it. Hopefully you can see that halo. And that is added to my foreground color picker. You can see it's right here. If you wanted to verify the color, you can grab it from a hex code, this color code right here. And what we can do is we can take this empty layer we have here and we can fill it. So I'll take the paint bucket tool, just like we filled the previous layer with red. I'm going to fill this layer with this eggshell color. What do we have here? So we have our base layer. We have a white kind of eggshelly layer right here. And then we have our subject that's over top of it. We also have a cloud layer, but it's hidden from view currently. So what we're seeing is our subject, which is masked, a white layer, and then our base image. And we can see that that's represented here. So our base image isn't visible because our layer 1, or rather this, I guess we'll just call it white layer. Our white layer is totally opaque. There's no transparent quality to it, and there's no mask applied. Now, if I was to lower the opacity in this image here, when I do that, you can start to see my base layer come through. This white layer with lowered opacity is telling us something pretty important. If I was to set this to say 50, this white layer is telling us that 50% of the pixels in that layer are turned on or fully presented to us, and 50% of the pixels in that layer are turned off. So what that looks like in practicality is that it looks like it is partially turned on, or it looks like this image is applying an effect, right? A white effect to the image that appears beneath it. When we reduce this quality to say 25, you can see that it's now less affecting the image. So 25% of the pixels in this white layer are impacting the layer directly beneath it. 75% aren't. Inversely, 75% of the pixels in this case are affecting the layer beneath it, 25% aren't. So with this value increasing, it becomes more opaque, and with this value decreasing, it becomes more transparent, as you can see. Okay, let's mask this layer. So I'm going to take, I think I'm just going to take the rectangle tool. I can take the rectangle tool and I'm going to make just a mask of our image here. I'm just going to mask kind of around halfway through my subject here. So I'm making a rectangle selection, and you can see that it's cut through my subject here, and it's on the white layer. And then when I go to click the mask button, now half of my subject, or sorry, half of my background layer is turned off. That's the part of my mask that is black, which is the left-hand side. The right-hand side was selected and therefore maintained or turned on in this case. And importantly, now you're starting to see the composition emerge, where I have this base layer, this background image. I have my white layer that's over top of it, and I have my subject that's on top of that. And so while he's a component technically of the base image, we've used him as a through line through the layer that appeared after it, right? There's a lot of ways you can do stuff with this. This is a way to create a dimension in your image. And what we're going to do in this case is we're going to add text actually behind our subject. And when we do that, what it's going to do is it's going to give, again, more dimension to our image. And so we can use parts of our image to come through. Another thing to keep in mind too is we can take parts of our subject and move them over top, right? Just to give an example, if I wanted some text to go underneath of the camera in our subject, I could make a whole new selection of just the camera and put that above the subject layer, above the text layer, and now I have another layer of dimension that's added to our image here. So one of the things that we get out of pulling our subject over top of another layer is we're using something that's already ingrained in the image itself, that's like already situated in the image, and we're using it to inform I guess the dimensionality of our image. And it looks kind of cool. It gives a portion of our image here that now is like a focal point or an interest, and we can take this a step further when we go to add something like text. We'll add text in a bit, but I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do something with this layer. So what I'm going to do here, I have this layer here, as you can see, that's the sky layer. And it's over top of all of my layers here. As you can see, it's over top of my my subject here, and it's certainly over top of the white layer. What I might want to do here is I might want to just put it over top of the, excuse me, sorry, put it over top of my image layer here. But to do this, what I might actually do is I might use a ruler. A ruler is going to be more accurate than just my eye in this case. I'll just leave this committed for now, and we'll talk about rulers. So let me see. I think it's a panes thing. Let's turn on rulers. You can go to view and turn on rulers. And rulers will add this little, it's a measuring tool that exists on the edge here. But the cool thing about rulers is that you can use guides with them. So if I take this white layer here, okay, and you can see that I can use this ruler, which I'm pulling it from, I'm pulling this guide from the ruler. And you can see that it sticks to things. And one of the things it sticks to is my mask, the edge of my mask. So when I go to add that, you can see that it's added to my image here. And I can use this as a reference point for where I pull my images to. So if I click on this image, the sky image again, with my ruler set, I can move this over and it'll stick or hug to the ruler there. This is really useful for composition images for like accuracy and placement. I might flip this around actually, we'll see. Just might do this. Maybe this is more clouds than the other side. Oh no, this is a way better side. Yeah, we'll stick with this. Maybe I'll even move it up like that. Oh yeah, that's way better. So I'll commit this. And as you can see, it's tucked right next to that ruler. It's actually pixel perfect, so I don't need to worry about that. And I can move this layer underneath of my subject here, and it's placed underneath that. If I want to just hide the guides from view, I can go to view. Let's see here. Hide guidelines, and that'll just temporarily hide that. If I want to show it again, I can go back to view and unhide the guidelines. I don't think I'll need it again, so I'm just going to hide it. I'm going to take this layer here, which is my sky layer, I suppose, that I have kind of next to my subject here. It feels like he's almost walking into it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask again to this image. So I have my image selected, and I'm going to navigate down to the mask tool, and I'm going to mask it. Now, I'm just going to mask this rather than make a selection or a rectangle or something like that. I'm really just going to brush on black to this image, and I'll show you what I mean. So when I take my brush tool, I'm going to crank the feathering on this so it's really high. The feathering is the space after the nib, which is the center circle. It's this checkered circle that exists on the edge there. A high feathering just means that the effect is going to be really, I wonder if the term would be gradiated from the center to the edge. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to make sure that I'm brushing on black because my mask is white and I want to hide the edges of this. Ooh, that effect is way too strong though. So let's lower this to like 15. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to click. And as I click, you can see it begin to disappear. I just want to get that left side. So that's pretty good. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this overall composition. I want to keep the left side here because it visually looks kind of cool, but I want to hide the right-hand side, which I've done using this mask here. From here, I might actually just lower the opacity even more to just give this slight appearance of clouds that just on the left side. So the masking itself removed that part of the image from view. And then the opacity slider is reducing the whole opacity on this layer with the masking considered. So if I was to lower this to 0, obviously nothing would be applied, but around the, I don't know, 40 or 50 range, I can see a little bit of that left-hand side poke through. From here, what we can do is we can add text. I'm going to add a text layer and I'm going to tuck it behind our subject here. Let's do it. I'm going to click on the text tool. The text tool is not a tool I use very often in my tutorials, to be honest with you, but it's really good and it's a very cool tool. Basically, it gives me the ability to add, as I said, text on my image here. So text underneath of a subject, classic image composition, classic photographic art function, really cool. It just, I mean, there's something about just a subject overlaid over top of an image that looks awesome. So I'm going to do that. Let's write this person's name. This isn't actually the the name of the photographer. I should get the photographer's name, but I'm just making something up for this video. So we have our image here. I'm just going to tuck the text underneath like that. I'm probably going to change the color of this text too. Just something that's strong and bold. And what I'm going to do here is with my text selected, so when I go to make a text tool selection, you can see that this bounding box pops up. Same bounding box we worked with when we were working with when we were placing our image, right? Works the same way. I can increase the size of it. I believe I can rotate it using the center point here. It's just moved outwards, so it doesn't impact the text selection. And then I can always change, if I wrote something incorrectly, I can always change that text when I go to highlight it. I'm going to click on so up top here, there's this big section here where it has all these text tools. So I have my font already selected. I have a regular weight to the font. The size is pretty big because this is a pretty big image. I have the color choice. I can bold, underline, or italicize the image, and I can change its orientation. I'm going to click on the center of the color here. This guy pops up. I'm going to see if I can select the green of his coat, which is quite a beautiful color, this nice cyan color. I'm going to click it, click OK, and that'll change the color of the font. Let's add a whole nother layer of text that says photography. So I'm going to navigate away. I want to navigate away from that layer because it'll want to add another one. Yeah, this is pretty good. So then we'll add the word photography. This can be a bit smaller. Probably not that small though. And then we can place it and we'll change the color again to maybe another color inferred from our image here. So select the text, select the center here. I kind of like this red, this almost like burnt rust color here. There we go. Click OK. Changes it to that browny red color. I might increase the saturation on that slightly. What I'm doing is clicking on the color picker itself and I'm just going to increase the saturation by sliding this over to the right. And now it's a bit more saturated. That looks better. From here, I can actually move this layer. So let's see, where do I want it? I think I want it I think the only layer I want to have interact with his face is his actual name. I think this layer can just live like that. And that looks pretty good. And so what I have here is just like a banner, basically, that uses some really basic, interesting tools. So I have, in this case, what we've done is we've fully used the selection tool. Specifically, we use the AI selection tool, right? To begin the selection process on our subject. They then refined with tools like the brush selection tool and the shape selection tool. From there, what we did is we made a selection of our subject. And in the example, I showed you how to save that selection just using the save function. And from here, what we can do is we can take that selection, we can make a duplication of our selection, or sorry, make a duplication of our layer, the base image in this case, and then apply that selection to a brand new layer, which we did with our subject here. So that enables me to take our subject without moving our subject on the image to a different location, which we certainly could do. What we did is we just moved it up in our layer order. So it now lives above that base layer. And from there, we can fill in this sort of intermediary component, right? We can fill in the layer that exists underneath of it, that white layer. In addition to, we've added the text in this component as well. So we've added like a textual component that sort of applies in between as well. So, you could take some finishing touches to this too. I would do maybe something like a photo effect if I wanted to, that applied some sort of blend that blended everything nicely together. That's obviously a pretty strong effect, but even just like a light sepia tone over top or something like that, like does a lot to justify and homogenize the changes to your image. You could explore, if you don't want to use something like a poster effect, you could always explore something like maybe doing like a gradient map over top of your image. So choosing like a really strong color in your image, like this green that we have here. Maybe that's a bad example. Maybe just choosing a darker color in my image and a lighter color in my image and applying a subtle, well, let's see, here will be a lighter color, maybe this tan. Oops. What would be a good reference point? Let's just pick a color for now. You could apply a gradient map to your image and then lower the opacity over this, or apply a blend mode to your image to get a similar effect as a photo effect, but without too dramatically affecting the colors in your image here as well. Once you have your, this is just as simple as a gradient map. Once you have your composition, everything's laid out nicely. You can apply like levels and exposure adjustments curve adjustments over top to make that pop even further. Yeah, that sort of covers what I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully, this gives you new tools to work with when it comes to making your own photographic art or composition images. In this example, we took something that was like really practical and just made a banner for a character that we've created, right? And yeah, that gives us the ability to go through and to now use these layers, use these masking tools, use text tools, things like that, use blends, and to create a composition that incorporates multiple files together, and multiple selections, and importantly, lots of different masking functionalities. Yeah, that sort of covers it for today, folks. Does anyone have any questions? Most importantly, thank you so much for participating in the workshop. As always, it's really appreciated. If anyone has any questions, or if anyone would has any suggestions for future workshops, I'd be happy to look at that. Not said, interesting. Look forward to your upload to practice step by step. Yeah, I'm glad you found that useful, Not. That's awesome. I will upload it as I always do. Thanks, Adam. This was most informative for me. I'm glad, John. Hopefully that gives you some new tools. Norm, excellent workshop. You're so welcome. Thank you, Norm, for participating. Susan, thank you. Are there other workshops that can be viewed online? Yes. I'll show you. So we have a YouTube channel, Susan. I'll link it right now. That's in the chat right now, but basically it's ACDSee Photo Studio, ACDSee on YouTube. And we have a whole bunch of workshops and tutorials that get uploaded on our page here. If I go to the video section, the video section will showcase the most recent videos from us. I just did a tutorial on film negatives recently, and I did a workshop on developing and restoring old images presently. Pardon me. And I also have a playlist of our different workshops as well. So there's 24, wow, or no, sorry, where's our workshop playlist? There's so much content in this. So our workshop playlist has 114 videos, and each of those are approximately 45 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes long. So there's over 114 hours of like tutorial content for you to watch, or I guess workshop content for you to watch here. Yeah, anyway, check that out. Oh, what else we got here? Let's see here. Susan, thank you for the question. Skip, you're so welcome. Laurent, thank you. Juicy, thank you. John, thank you. CB, you're so welcome. Andy, thank you. Steve, thank you. Hartman, thank you. Irina, thanks. Good explanation. How can I contact you? Oh, Irina, if you go to our workshop page, free workshop page, you click on past, I believe. Click on this. You should be able to click on my name, and this will give you the ability to contact me. Other than that, you can also find me just on our members page and just send me a personal message that way. And happy to answer any questions. Again, I'm always looking for workshop suggestions. So if you want something for me to cover, let me know. I will do it. This one was a workshop selection. The previous one was a workshop select. Sorry, the previous two workshops were ones that were suggested from participants like yourself, from users like you. Bridget, thank you so much. Susan, you're so welcome. Hartman, yeah, thank you. Ray, thanks again. I look forward to it being posted. Yes, can do. Please mention how you can save the work so you can revisit. For sure. CB. So I have my workshop. This is actually great because I needed to do this anyway. I was going to do this after I've done the recording, but I might as well do it now. CB, when I have a workshop file, or sorry, when I have a composition image file, and I want to maintain the layers in it, I have to save it as a very particular file type. So I'm going to click Save. I'm going to go to Save As, and I'm going to save it as an ACDSee file format, and let's do banner. Let's save it as banner. This ACDSee file format, this is the one that contains layers, and it enables you to further edit this image in the future. Super important. Just memorize ACDSee file format for whenever you're creating images in edit mode. When I save this as a banner, boom, it's going to save. It's going to take a moment to write because there's lots of information in this file. By nature, ACDSee files are going to be quite a bit larger than your regular files because A, they contain multiple images, and B, there's a bunch of data going into um, their creation. So I navigate back to manage mode. You can see importantly that there's a little icon that tells me this is an ACDSee file. When I click on this image, I can go into edit mode, and there it is. Boom. That's that. That's how you save it. Great. Non-destructive. Yeah, so that would be a non-destructive way to save your image. When I open this ACDSee file, you can see that all the layers are present, and anything that I would or could be able to edit, like masks, the text files themselves, adjustment layers, those are all editable. Enjoy. Okay, I think that has to be it for me today, folks. I really appreciate you participating. As always, like I said, suggestions, shoot me a message. Happy to touch base in regards to anything you want. I'm also taking, I had a person recently message me regarding our YouTube page, and they suggested this video on film negatives. So I did a tutorial recently on film negatives, and what I mean by that is a user was like, "Hey, I have thousands of film negatives from a lifetime of taking film photos. I'm digitizing those photos. How do I turn them into film positives?" That video is for you. That's how to do that. So we batch that action and do a showcase how to do that in a tutorial. So if that seems relevant to you, let me know. But that was again a suggestion from a user much like yourself. So get in my personal messages to make suggestions like that. And otherwise, I will see you next time. I have to schedule some new workshops, so I will do that soon. Take care, guys. Thank you so much for participating. I'm going to mute my mic now. I'll probably close the workshop off in about 2 to 3 minutes, just to let you know. So if there's any questions, I'll answer them. But yeah, have a great rest of your day.